This is the Trading Psychology Podcast. This is VP, creator of No Nonsense Forex and author of the book No Nonsense Forex Trading Psychology. And with me, as always, is Rob Reinhold.
Hey everybody, this is Rob Reinhold with Maverick Currencies. I absolutely love the trading psychology part of this business. And I tell people all the time, I have not read an actual book on trading for at least a decade. All I read now is psychology and behavioral finance. I'm so excited to share all of this stuff with you.
Speaking of books, you have a very interesting promo for us this week. Tell us about this.
As I said, I love to share this with people, and we're going to be talking about a book called Peak. The book is by Anders Ericsson and Robert Poole, and there's two titles. It's either Peak, Secrets from the New Science of Expertise, or Peak, How to Master Almost Anything. This is a very scientific breakdown of how to get really good at something. And I want to share this with you, so we're going to take 5 comments from this video on YouTube. And I'm going to choose those 5 comments, and I'm going to get in touch with you, and I'm going to send you this book personally. So that means go on to the YouTube channel, make some comments, make them funny. Look, you can just self-promote yourself if you want, but I'm going to pick 5 people after the first week and a half that the video is out, and I'm going to reach out to you, and I want to send you this book. For the rest of you, I highly recommend you go and get this book. It is amazing.
And just for clarity, no matter where they are in the world, you will still send them this book?
Absolutely. Mail gets everywhere.
And on the self-promotion angle, remember, if you're cool, you can self-promote. If you're a shill, I will delete you. If you're a fan of Rob-heavy episodes, you are going to love this one. This is something that just kind of came out of the ether, and I will probably have some things to add here and there, but this is mostly Rob's baby. But I like what I see so far on the outline, so I'm really curious to see where this goes. Rob, why don't you just go, and anytime you have a question for me or want me to jump in, just let me know, and I'll be happy to do that.
This episode is titled Trade Like an Athlete. I grew up in athletics. I loved it. I had a lot of great experiences, and I found that a lot of the things I learned in athletics translated over to my career as a trader. What about you, Patrick?
Yeah, I wasn't a great athlete, but I did a lot of different things. It prepares you early on for, how to deal with a lot of things we've been talking about in the past, a string of success, a string of failures, feeling like you're not good enough, feeling like you're better than you already are. That it was a little more of an easier transition for me. Even though I still made all the classic mistakes, I feel like I got over them quicker because of my own personal background in athletics.
Do you think that athletes can make great traders?
I think they're actually built to be better traders, and I can certainly talk about that as we go along.
There are so many things that you learn as an athlete. Number one, hard work. It's hard work. You got to train. You got to practice. You got to train. And nothing comes without some blood, sweat, and tears. I see that as the number one thing that an athlete brings to the table. What do you think is their best attribute?
Yeah, I mean, it's a unique thing that a lot of people don't get to go through. And admittedly, I never really went through it on a high level either. I almost kind of wish I did. But yeah, there's so many psychological aspects to a really great athlete that translate into everything. But I'm serious. I think they are so built and so ready for the trading game. I just don't know if most of them even realize it.
One of the things that has surprised me is that how many ex-athletes we have had walk into the doors at Maverick. We have ex-NFL players, we have ex-decathletes, we have so many high-level athletes. It really surprised me until I started to learn more about this concept. So I'm going to introduce this book, Peak, and we're going to be talking about some of the aspects of this book. And this book really focuses in on training. Now, as a trader, your training is basically everything you do up to the point where you do live money. Think about how most people get into this business. I was like the poster child for the idiot who gets into this business. I probably read a few books, 1 or 2 books. This is back in the late 90s. And I thought to myself, I was the smartest person in the world. And I jumped in, and it was tough. Practice is everything you do before you put live money on the table. If someone said, I'm going to only practice a little bit before I do a triathlon, they probably aren't going to make it out of the swimming portion. because of they just weren't prepared. In your training, where you are building your system, I want to talk about what the book says is the best way to do that. It first starts out with the fallacy of what's called naive practice. What this means is that people think that the amount of time they spend on an activity will equal expertise in that activity. And that is actually false. And they've done lots of studies to show that if you aren't training the right way, you will get no better, and actually you will get worse at certain skills. I want to make this point because I know a lot of us spend a lot of time on trading, but it might not be the right time. Patrick, do you see people wasting a lot of time chasing a lot of different things and really have nothing to show for it after a while?
I mean, probably 99.999% of the time. I mean, look at all those how-to videos and look at all those books on trading that people read, but it never mentions the parts about money management or trading psychology, which just irritated me to no end. And that's why I devoted myself to spending so much time on it on my own channel, because I know it doesn't get clicks, it doesn't sell products or anything like that, but you can't ignore it. People just sit there and chase their tail the entire times. So yeah, I see it for every 100 times. For every one time I don't see it, I do see it 100 times after.
And that's exactly what the book Peak says. This naive practice isn't going to do you any good. You have to do what's called purposeful practice. And what they say, it must be planned, measured, and reviewed. So just think about two scenarios. Let's say that we have trader A that reads trading books. They go to the library. They read a little bit of this, a little bit of that. They learn some technical analysis, some fundamental analysis. And then I have another trader that sits on a trading simulator for 40 hours that week, only working on their exact entry point. Now, they both spent 40 hours a week. Which one of those traders is going to be better at the end of that week? What do you think, Patrick?
I'm sure trader number two, because he's not going to bumble and fumble over his entry points, or he's not going to second guess himself. He already kind of hardwired himself over that time to know exactly what to do.
The difference was purposeful practice. They were working on one specific aspect of trading. They weren't working on all aspects. They were working on one specific aspect. And that's what the book Peak says, is that purposeful practice beats naive practice every single time. And they say the way to become great at anything is to break what you're trying to do down into very small components and focus and practice on those very small components until you're an absolute expert at that. One of the best examples of this is in the NFL documentary on HBO called Hard Knocks. They followed J.J. Watt around his training. For those of you that don't know, J.J. Watt is a defensive end. He is one of the best in the league. He actually just retired this year. And they followed him around, and his training program was insane. He works 1 hour a day, 1 full hour a day, on the first step out of his stance. Now think about this. He's been doing this for 15 years. Every day, 1 hour spent on the first step out of his stance. Can you imagine how good you'd be if you focused like that? He may not have been born the most genetically gifted, fastest person out of the stance. He probably wasn't. But because of that focused practice, because that's what he worked on for 1 hour every single day, he now has one of the fastest first steps out of the stance of anyone out there. He also has another one where he has a wall made up of these lights. He had it built. And when the light comes on, he has to hit it with his hand. And then it turns off and another one comes on. And he does it as fast as he possibly can. He does this for another hour a day. Now, this is focused practice. This isn't him running out and playing football. This is him taking one thing that he needs to be really good in and focusing on that practice. So think about this in your life. Focus practice. What are you doing when you are learning about your trading? What are you doing that is focused, planned, measured, and reviewed? If you're not doing that, my guess is you are more on the naive practice and that you aren't really progressing as a trader. And Patrick, your example of the UFC fighters is exactly perfect. What they did is they went over to a new camp to where they were doing new things, to where they had new coaches showing them new methods, and they were all focused. They were focused to learning new things. The book peak shows that quality and intensity is way more important than time spent on anything.
I've heard this from a lot of people too. People that have come to my channel from, learning other systems, and they said, you know what? I've never been taught how to test a system before. I've never been taught to see, what makes a good tool and what makes a bad tool. I've never been taught how to journal and why, and what parts are more important than others. And it's crazy because to me it seems like the only way to do things. But I also remember being younger too, and just kind of, flying without a compass. And so I get it. And so I was, honestly, Rob, I was working super hard trying to learn other systems when I was younger. But it just didn't make any sense for what I was doing or for what I was trying to accomplish until I actually put it together myself. And I'm not recommending that anybody out there does it because, trust me, that takes a really, really long time. But if you found something that you think really works, pay really close attention to all of those pieces and don't skip over them. Because like Rob's saying, that's the difference between your naive practice and your focused practice right there is, let's say you have 10 things you need to do on your checklist. Do you do all 10 or do you feel like you can skip over a few? I still do everything on my list all the time to the point to where I'm so sick and tired of it. But I know if I deviate, if I leave one out, it's going to be ugly. So, it's one of those things. You just don't have a choice.
There's only one path to becoming a trader, and that's to do all the steps. You can't jump over steps. Every single step has to be perfected. And that's where this purposeful practice comes in. I want you to think about what you're doing in your life. Think about how you're doing it. Is it focused? Is it intense? Is it quality? If it's not, then change it. If you're not good at entry points, well, guess what? Why don't you spend the next 3 weeks on a trading simulator only working on your entry points and do it 1,000 times? That's a great thing now with technology. You can test things so fast. Do it 1,000 times and get really, really good at it. And then go to the next area of your trading and say, okay, I need to work on money management. And then you work on that. Just focus on that and measure it and plan it out. What you'll find is you're going to get a lot better than if you just read some books. So again, be focused. The next meaningful kind of practice in the book Peak, they call it deliberate practice. Now I'm going to call it mental practice. And that's really what it is, where it's mental. So you've got the physical aspect of it, to where you're breaking things down into small things and getting really good at it. The mental practice is so important. Let me give you one study in the book that I just thought was phenomenal. They took two groups of people that have never played chess before. They separated them in half. One group of people played one game of chess every single day for a year. Another group played no games of chess. They never played a game of chess, but what they did is they studied past chess games and they studied past chess moves. And at the end of the year, they measured the performance levels of these chess players. Group A had the equivalent of 1 year experience of chess. They played 1 year of chess and they were about as good as a person who had played 1 year of chess. The people that had never played a game of chess, when they tested them, they were on par with a chess player who'd been playing for 8 to 10 years. That's how important the mental aspect of this game is. This Trading Psychology podcast is exactly that. And as Patrick said earlier, everyone wants to spend 99% of their time on charts, on Fibonacci, on this and this and this. Focus on this. This is really, really important. It is going to really help you up your game to a whole nother level because this is part of the process. If you don't master this, you will not be successful at trading.
And this is never something I'd gone over myself because, for one, I just didn't think of it, but I totally understand the utility of it. If it's not muscle memory, make it muscle memory and actually, learn by doing that way. Some people might say, oh, that's absurd. I know how to enter a trade. I know how to exit a trade. Yeah, but you still deviate from the system. Maybe a really good way to counteract that is to just train your fingers and your brain and your psyche to do things the right way on a simulator, for example. So when it comes game time, it just becomes second nature and you no longer have these issues.
And speaking of game time, everything we talked about was practice, getting you better for the game. But in the world of athletics, you've got to perform. There is going to be a period of time where it's no longer practice. You have all your equipment on, you're in the game, there's other competitors that don't want you to win, and they're going to try to win, and you have to be ready for it. All of that training goes into it. All the training over the years comes to this one point where you're in the game. In the world of trading, in the game is when you've got your money on the line. Let's talk about how to get in the game the right way, like a good athlete is going to do it. First off, you got to have a healthy body. We talked about this in episode 1 or 2, where we covered things like hunger and sleep. Are you in the right frame of mind to be trading? Is your body going to be strong for you and not try to undermine you?
I'm not a big goals person because let's say you're like, I want to hit 20% this year, and then you don't. Let's say you hit 18. That's still amazing. You're going to feel like you came up short, and you feel like, oh, I need to try harder next year. Well, no, you just need to follow your system better if you want to get better. But like when you set goals, there's a lot that goes into that. Maybe my goal is 20%, but in 2018 or 2019, that was freaking impossible with the markets. So it's like I'm a systems over goals guy for those reasons. I've never actually said this out loud for what it's worth, and I don't have to. But I just wanted to see what you thought about that.
We talked about this concept of realistic goals, and we said to reframe what your definition of success was. Remember that success was always the money. We said, no, reframe that, because the money, you can't plan that out. That is just a result. So you need to start talking about goals in manners of, I want to follow my system perfectly for the whole month. That is a much healthier way to go into that game. Let's say that an athlete goes into a game where, okay, they're up against the best team out there, and they're one of the worst teams out there. And for that athlete to go into that game saying, I bet we beat them by 50 points, is ridiculous. That athlete should go out there saying, hey, you know what? I'm going to do my job the best as I can. And all of a sudden, at the end of the game, if they've done that, they're going to feel very positive about themselves. They're going to work harder that next week, prepare even better for the next game, and get better. But the player who said, oh, we got killed, I didn't see it coming, they're going to be dejected for those first couple days.
And that kind of leads me into something that I've always thought of in terms of why athletes are built for something like trading. And that is the ability to have a short memory. Because just like in sports, you are going to fail so many times in trading, and most people just aren't ready for that. I mean, the amount of losses I've taken could fill up a house, but in sports, the things that I was particularly good at, I would say, was probably baseball, tennis, and I boxed for a year. And in all of those, I struck out a lot. It affects you for a couple minutes, but then you're over it. In tennis, you make a million mistakes when you play tennis, but you can still win and you can still perform really well. And in boxing, you should never get hit with a flush shot, but you do, and it hurts, and you have to make a decision really quick. How am I going to recover from this? How am I going to get back on track? And so I think those are wonderful lessons going forward. They always say in football, a cornerback has to have a really short memory because they'll get burnt sometimes. They'll get beat deep in front of millions of people watching. How do you recover from that? You have to have a really, really short memory. And that kind of ties into what we were talking about a few episodes ago with losing streaks. You can't let those things affect you, or else you're just going to completely fall apart. That's the one great thing about sports. It's an absolute truth teller to who you are mentally. And so I always thought that people who really excelled in that arena could also really, really do well in trading.
Having a short memory is very important. Patrick, I played both free safety and cornerback in college. Despite my best efforts, I did get beat sometimes, and you're the last guy on the field. And if they get past you, it's a touchdown. And that happened. And if I sat there kicking myself and telling myself I was no good, the next time the team came on the field, I'd get beat again. You've got to have that short memory. You just have to flush it away and refocus on what you're trying to accomplish.
So tell me this, since you actually did it, it doesn't mean the feeling isn't there. It just means you have to get rid of it as soon as possible, right?
Comes back to that recency bias episode we did. Am I going to be a worse free safety in the next series because I got beat? If the answer is yes, then that's a mental breakdown. If the answer is no, then I'm doing it right. Because you will get beat. It's a guarantee. Just like in trading, you're going to have a losing streak. That's a guarantee. Did you show up the next game, the next series, and play to the best of your abilities? If the answer is yes, you did great.
Yeah, and something else I've always thought with athletes too, I was interviewed on a podcast that mostly had to do with people who love to go to the gym. He was just a fan of the channel, so he decided to have me on. And one of the things I said that I think he was really surprised to hear, which I thought was crazy, is that I always thought that your typical gym bro, people that really dedicate themselves to having kind of that 0.1%, type of body, would do absolutely amazing as traders because they understand systems, they understand not deviating from them, and they understand the long game. They all have those things in common. And those are probably the three things that take your average person forever to figure out. So if anybody out there has that gym bro mentality, or anybody out there who is or was a high-level athlete in any regard, or even like me, like I'm just a middle-of-the-road athlete, you probably already have these things in you, and you just need to carry them through.
Absolutely. So in the game, you've just got to be present in the moment. You did all the work in advance. You're in the moment. Make sure you're healthy. Make sure you have good goals. And if things don't go your way, flush it away and just reset. All right, let's talk about after the game. What do athletes do after the game? Well, the very first thing I remember doing the next day after our games was film study. Film study. We all showed up and the coach yelled at us, told us all the things we did wrong. Sometimes we got patted on the back, but mostly it was being yelled at. This is journaling. Patrick, what are your views on journaling?
It's essential. And I actually deviated from this for a while and I stopped and then I brought it back and I noticed the difference. I felt like I was too experienced, I guess, that I didn't need to really do it anymore. But what I didn't realize is that it was a big piece of my success. And that was tough to get over because I thought, after a point you can just kind of let it go. No, you need to have this in front of you all the time because it's really the only way to know for sure if you're messing up or not. And that starts with being honest in the journal on the comments section and then actually taking a look at it and say, oh, I might have actually gotten a little bit worse, a little bit sloppier over time, because that's a real thing that can happen, but you'll never know if you don't do it.
Journaling for me was one of the hardest things because I am not a write it down kind of guy. When I have to give a Valentine's note or a letter to my wife, I will sit on the computer, type it out, print it, fold it up, and put it inside of a Hallmark card because I hate writing things down. So in the beginning, I struggled with journaling because I don't like to do it. I like action. So I really struggled, and I remember another trader said, hey, you just got to do this. You got to make it part of it. And once I started doing it, I all of a sudden started doing what was in the book Peak called purposeful practice. Remember, naive practice, I was just all over the place, making trades, doing this and this. Without a plan and a measure, what could be reviewed? You have to do it this way. You have to journal. I agree with you that journaling is necessary. I don't love it. The great thing is now it's pretty much all automatic. If you know how to just download stuff, all of the good journaling, it costs money. Just go out and pay it. It's part of your expenses of being in this. Pay your $40, $50 a month, whatever it is, because it is so important. When I hear that some traders don't have a journal, the first thing I think is, aren't you curious about your numbers? Like, to me, I love to run my journal because I love to see the numbers. I love stats. So I'm always so curious of like, what were my numbers during that period of time? I just love it. And then all of a sudden, then you can make improvements.
Yeah, and the biggest thing too is remember, all the top athletes out there also do this. They just don't do it themselves. They have people to do this for them. We don't. So we still have to do it just like they do, but we have to actually do it ourselves. We don't get a pass. But everybody has access to those numbers. It's just a matter if they're done automatically or by other people or by yourself. I prefer the by yourself method because you can have that comment section, which I always say is so crucial. If you do it automatically, that's fine. Just transfer those numbers over to a spreadsheet and then leave yourself a comment section, because if you made a mistake of any type, you need to chronicle that. You need to document that, because that's the only way to know if you're getting better or if you're getting worse.
And one of the most valuable things about that is that you can share those numbers with someone. If you have someone in your life that you know that is decent at either looking at numbers or decent at trading, they can actually step in and show you, oh, you're doing these things wrong, or have you thought about doing it differently? That's one of the most valuable things that we see at Maverick, is that whenever we have a trader that says, hey, I'm not getting the results I want, first thing we say is, send us your journal. If a trader sends me their journal, I can look at that journal and say, hey, you need to fix these 2 or 3 things and you're going to have a great trading career. Without it, you're probably going to struggle. It's that clear. So it's just like when you went into the film session after the game. During the game, you were trying your hardest. You thought you did everything right. After the game, the coach says, hey, you actually did this wrong. You were lined up in the wrong spot. I didn't see that. I didn't know that. So to be able to have someone to tell you, hey, this is what you're doing wrong, you got to have a journal. Without a journal, there's no one that can help you out.
And I can vouch for this too about Maverick. And if you're a part of Maverick, you already know these guys do not let you lose. They'll do everything they can to keep you in the game. If you lose, it's on you.
We try our best.
So on that note, I think this is a good time to conclude. Thank you all for joining us. We will see you next week.
Goodbye, everybody.